They say freezing to death is like falling asleep. They're lying. It burns. It feels like 1,000 knives slicing through your skin before the darkness takes you. Cassidy thought she was just saving a helpless child from the icy Chicago River. She didn't know that the boy drowning in the dark water was the heir to the Valenti crime family. She didn't know that pulling him out would drag her under, into a world of silencers, billion-dollar secrets, and a man who could burn the city to the ground for his son. She saved the boy's life, but she was about to find out. That might have been her fatal mistake. This is the drowning debt. The receipt crumbled in Cassidy Sullivan's hand. $48. That was her take-home for a double shift at Jerry's Diner on 35th Street. It wasn't enough to cover the heating bill, let alone the rent that was 3 weeks overdue. The Chicago wind in November was a physical assault. It whipped off Lake Michigan, cutting through her threadbare denim jacket and biting into her skin. Cassidy adjusted her scarf, ducking her head as she walked along the Wacker Drive bridge. It was 2 a.m. The city was asleep, save for the distant hum of traffic on the I-90 and the occasional siren wailing like a dying animal in the distance. She stopped for a moment, looking over the railing at the Chicago River. It looked like black oil, churning silently below. "Just one break," she whispered, her breath puffing out in a white cloud. "I just need one break." She was about to turn away when she heard it. It wasn't a scream. It was a splash, heavy and unnatural. Cassidy squinted into the darkness below. The riverwalk was deserted, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the street lamps. Then she saw the taillights of a black SUV, no plates, peeling away from the lower service road, tires screeching against the asphalt. And there, bobbing in the freezing current, was a patch of beige, a coat, a small coat. "Oh my God," Cassidy gasped. She didn't think. If she had thought, she would have remembered that she was 24, broke, and had no health insurance. She would have remembered that the river temperature was hovering near 40 degrees. She scrambled down the maintenance stairs, her boots slipping on the icy metal. When she reached the concrete edge, she saw him, a boy, no older than 6, thrashing weakly. The heavy wool coat he was wearing was dragging him down. "Hey, hold on!" she screamed, her voice tearing at her throat. The boy's head went under. He didn't come back up. Cassidy kicked off her boots. She took a breath that tasted of exhaust and freezing rain, and she dove. The shock was immediate. It hit her like a sledgehammer to the chest. The cold paralyzed her lungs, squeezing the air out of her. Her limbs felt heavy instantly, her jeans soaking up the water like lead weights. "Move!" she screamed internally. "Move or die!" She kicked downward, eyes stinging in the murky filth. She groped blindly in the dark until her fingers brushed against something soft. Wool. She grabbed the collar of the coat and kicked for the surface. Her lungs were burning, screaming for oxygen. They broke the surface, and Cassidy gasped, sucking in air that felt like broken glass. The boy was limp in her arms. "No, no, no," she chanted, dragging him towards the concrete embankment. She hauled him up onto the freezing pavement, scraping her palms raw. She dragged herself up after him, collapsing beside his small body. He was pale, his lips blue. He looked like a porcelain doll, broken and discarded. She immediately started CPR. "Come on," she gritted out, pressing down on his small chest. "Don't you do this! Don't you die on me!" 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4. She pinched his nose and breathed into his mouth. The taste of river water and copper filled her senses. "Breathe!" "Dish!" She screamed, tears of frustration and cold freezing on her cheeks. "Breathe, damn it!" A convulsion shook the small body. The boy gagged, turned his head, and retched water onto the concrete. Cassidy fell back, sobbing with relief. Okay, you're good. I got you." The boy looked at her. His eyes were dark, terrified, and incredibly old for a child's face. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just shivered violently. Cassidy pulled him into her lap, trying to share her body heat, though she had none left to give. She fumbled for a phone in her wet pocket. Dead. Waterlogged. "Help!" she screamed toward the bridge above. "Someone help!" Minutes felt like hours. The boy's shivering was slowing down. A bad sign. Hypothermia was setting in. Cassidy hugged him tighter, rocking him. "Stay awake," she chattered, her teeth clattering together. "What's your name?" "I'm Cass. Can you tell me your name?" The boy remained silent, his small hand gripping her wet shirt with a strength that surprised her. Finally, lights. Blue and red flashing against the limestone of the bridge. An ambulance siren cut through the night. "Over here!" she yelled, waving a freezing arm. 2 paramedics rushed down the stairs, followed by a police officer. They swarmed the boy, wrapping him in thermal blankets, putting an oxygen mask on his face. "He was under for maybe 30 seconds, Cassidy stammered, her vision blurring. I saw a car drive away." "We got him, Mom," one paramedic said, lifting the boy onto a stretcher. The boy reached out for her, his eyes wide with panic as they pulled him away. "Wait." Cassidy tried to stand, but her legs gave out. The world tilted sideways. The adrenaline crashed, leaving only the cold. "Mom! Mom!" The last thing she saw was the flashing red lights reflecting off the black water before the darkness swallowed her whole. When Cassidy woke up, it was to the smell of antiseptic and the beep of a monitor. She blinked, her eyes gritty. She was in a hospital bed, wearing a scratchy gown. A heavy wool blanket was tucked up to her chin. Northwestern Memorial. She recognized the view out the window. She used to clean floors here 2 years ago. A nurse in blue scrubs bustled in. "Oh, good. You're awake. You gave us a scare, honey. Severe hypothermia." Cassidy sat up, ignoring the headache that throbbed behind her eyes. "The boy," she croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "How is the boy?" The nurse paused, checking Cassidy's IV drip. She frowned. "The boy?" "The kid I pulled out of the river," Cassidy said, urgency rising in her chest. "Is he okay? He was so cold." The nurse looked at her with an expression of genuine confusion. "Honey, you were brought in alone. The police report said a patrol car found you passed out on the Riverwalk. There was no boy." Cassidy froze. "What?" "No, I pulled him out. The paramedics took him first. He was wearing a beige coat." "Burberry, I think." The nurse patted her hand patronizingly. "Trauma can do funny things to the memory. You were hallucinating from the cold. There was no record of a child admission last night from your sector." "I'm not crazy," Cassidy snapped, ripping the tape off her hand to adjust the IV. "He was there. I did CPR on him. Miss Sullivan, please calm down, or I'll have to call security," the nurse said firmly. "Rest. You're lucky to be alive." The nurse left the room. Cassidy sat in the silence, her heart pounding against her ribs. She looked at her hands. They were scraped raw, the skin red and angry. She closed her eyes and she could still feel the weight of him, the smell of the expensive wool, the terror in those dark eyes. She wasn't crazy. She swung her legs out of bed. She needed to leave. She needed to find out what happened. As she reached for her clothes, which were folded neatly on a chair, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. It must have been tucked into the pocket of her jeans, which were now dry and stiff. Cassidy picked it up. It wasn't paper. It was a card. Heavy, cream-colored stock. Expensive. There was no name. Just a symbol embossed in black ink, a wolf with a dagger in its jaws, and a phone number written in sharp, angular handwriting. And on the back, 3 words, "For your silence." Cassidy stared at the card. The nurse said there was no boy. The police report said she was alone. But someone had put this in her pocket while she was unconscious. She wasn't crazy. She had saved someone important. And apparently someone very powerful wanted the world to think that boy was dead. 3 days later, Cassidy was back at Sal's pit stop. She hadn't called the number. She had shoved the card into a jewelry box, an old cigar box under her bed, and tried to forget it. But her life had a way of not letting her forget things. "Cass, table 4 needs a refill and stop daydreaming," Sal bellowed from the kitchen window. Sal was a sweaty man who smelled of onions and old grease. "On it, Sal," Cassidy muttered, grabbing the coffee pot. She felt like she was being watched. She had felt it ever since she left the hospital. A prickly sensation on the back of her neck. When she walked home, she saw cars slowing down. When she was in her apartment, she heard footsteps in the hallway that stopped right outside her door. She poured coffee for a trucker who winked at her. She ignored him. As she turned to head back to the counter, the bell above the diner door jingled. The noise in the diner didn't stop, but the atmosphere changed instantly. It was as if the air pressure dropped. 2 men walked in. They were out of place. Sal's was a place for flannel shirts, work boots, and desperation. These men wore suits that cost more than the building. Italian cut, charcoal grey, tailored to hide the holsters Cassidy knew were there. They didn't look for a table. They looked at her. One of them, a mountain of a man with a scar running through his left eyebrow, walked straight to the counter. "Cassidy Sullivan?" he asked. His voice was like gravel grinding together. "Who's asking?" Cassidy gripped the coffee pot handle tighter, using it as a shield. "Our employer would like a word," the man said. It wasn't a request. "I'm on shift," Cassidy said, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I don't know your employer." "He knows you," the man said. "He knows you went swimming the other night." Cassidy's blood ran cold. The diner suddenly felt very small. Sal poked his head out of the kitchen, saw the suits, saw the grim expressions, and immediately ducked back in. "Coward," she thought. "I don't want any trouble," Cassidy whispered. "Then come with us," the man said. "The car is outside." She looked out the grease-stained window. A matte black Mercedes G-Wagon was idling at the curb. "And if I say no," the man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Sullivan, you hold a debt. We are just here to collect." She knew then that she didn't have a choice. If they wanted to hurt her, they would have done it already. They wanted something else. "Let me get my coat," she said. The drive took 40 minutes. They headed north, away from the grime of the city, towards the sprawling estates of Lake Forest. The houses here weren't houses. They were fortresses of stone and glass, hidden behind iron gates and high hedges. The car turned into a driveway that looked more like a private road. They passed a security checkpoint, where armed guards nodded at the driver. The estate that came into view was terrifyingly beautiful. It was a modern Gothic manor, dark stone and sharp angles looming against the grey sky. The car stopped. The scarred man opened her door. Inside, library. Second door on the left. "Oh!" Cassidy walked up the steps, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The front doors opened before she touched them. The interior was vast, cold and silent. Marble floors reflected her cheap sneakers. She walked to the library, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The room was lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A fire roared in a massive stone hearth, the only source of warmth in the house. Standing by the window with his back to her was a man. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his white dress shirt. He held a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. "Sit," he commanded. His voice was low, baritone, and vibrated through the room. Cassidy remained standing. "I prefer to stand." The man turned around. Cassidy's breath hitched. He was devastatingly handsome, in a way that was almost painful to look at. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline covered in a shadow of stubble, and eyes that were the color of storm clouds, grey and turbulent. But his face was etched with exhaustion and a simmering, controlled rage. This was Dante Valenti. She knew the face. Everyone in Chicago knew the face, though usually it was on the news regarding alleged racketeering charges that never stuck, or charity galas that were fronts for money laundering. The head of the Valenti crime syndicate, the Capo Dei Capi. "You are younger than I expected," Dante said, his eyes scanning her, dissecting her. "And poorer." I work for a living, Cassidy snapped, her fear momentarily replaced by defensiveness, unlike some people. Dante's eyes narrowed. He took a sip of his drink. You have a sharp tongue. Be careful not to cut yourself with it. He walked over to a desk and picked up a tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it toward her. It was a grainy video. Security footage. It showed the river walk. It showed the boy falling. It showed Cassidy diving in. It showed her saving him. I watched this 50 times, Dante said quietly. My security team, they failed. My son was taken from his bed, drugged and thrown off a bridge by a rival faction. They intended to send me a message, a dead air. He set the tablet down. But you, he stepped closer, invading her personal space. She could smell him. Sandalwood, whiskey, and danger. You ruined their message. I just did what anyone would do, Cassidy said, backing up until her legs hit a leather armchair. No, Dante corrected. Most people would have walked away, or filmed it for social media. You jumped into near-freezing water. Where is he? Cassidy asked. The boy, Leo? She remembered seeing the name in the papers years ago. Dante's expression softened, just for a fraction of a second. He is alive. Physically, he is recovering. Mentally. He trailed off, the mask of the cold boss slipping. He has not spoken a word since that night. He screams if anyone touches him. Doctors, nurses, even me. He looked at Cassidy with an intensity that made her knees weak. Except you. Cassidy blinked. What? The paramedics told me, Dante said. He held on to you. He wouldn't let go. You are the only person he has responded to. He walked back to his desk and picked up a piece of paper. He slid it across the mahogany surface. I have a proposition for you, Miss Sullivan. Cassidy looked at the paper. It was a contract. I need someone Leo trusts. I need someone to watch him, be with him, 24/7. I cannot trust my guards. One of them let him be taken. I cannot trust the nannies. They are spies or incompetents. I'm a waitress, Cassidy said. I'm not a nanny, and I'm definitely not a mob wife. Dante's lip curled in a dry amusement. I am not asking for a wife. I am asking for a caretaker. He pointed to the bottom of the page. The salary is $10,000 a month, plus room and board here, plus full health insurance. Cassidy's jaw dropped. 10,000. That changed everything. That was her debt paid. That was a new life. And if I refuse, then you leave, Dante said coldly, and you go back to your diner and your overdue rent and your empty life. And you hope that the men who threw my son off that bridge don't find out that you are the witness who saw their car. The threat hung in the air. It wasn't a threat from him. It was a statement of fact. She was already involved. Why me? She asked softly. Because you saved him, Dante said, his voice dropping to a whisper. And because I owe you a debt. A Valenti always pays his debts. Cassidy looked at the contract. She looked at Dante, this dangerous, broken man. She thought of the little boy with the terrified eyes. She picked up the pen. I have conditions, she said. Dante raised an eyebrow. You are in no position to negotiate, Miss Sullivan. I want no guns around the boy, she said firmly, and I want to be able to leave the property on weekends. Dante studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Agreed. Cassidy signed her name. Welcome to the family, Cassidy, Dante said. The way he said her name, like it was a secret he was keeping, sent a shiver down her spine. Now come. Leo is waiting. The Valenti estate was beautiful, but it was a tomb. That was Cassidy's first assessment after 48 hours inside the walls. The floors were marble that chilled her feet through her socks. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of grandfather clocks that cost more than her entire life's earnings. Her room was adjacent to Leo's suite. It was luxurious, a 4-poster bed, silk sheets, a bathroom with a tub the size of a swimming pool, but the windows were made of bulletproof glass and the door locked from the outside as well as the inside. She wasn't a guest. She was a high-paid prisoner. Cassidy stood in the doorway of Leo's room. The boy was sitting on the floor, surrounded by untouched toys, Lego sets, remote-controlled cars, tablets. He was staring at the wall, rocking slightly back and forth. "Hey, Leo," Cassidy said softly, sitting down on the carpet a few feet away. She didn't crowd him. She learned that quickly. If she got too close, he flinched. Leo didn't look at her. "I brought you something," she whispered. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, cheap plastic object. It was a fidget spinner, bright neon green. It looked ridiculous against the Persian rug. "Found it in my bag. Used to help me think when the diner got loud." She spun it. Whirr! The sound cut through the silence. Leo stopped rocking. His dark eyes flickered towards the spinning green blur. "You can try it," she said, sliding it across the floor. He stared at it until it stopped spinning. Then, with a trembling hand, he reached out. He flicked it. It spun again. A tiny, almost imperceptible breath of relief escaped him. "Mrs. Sullivan?" Cassidy jumped. A woman was standing in the doorway. It was Greta, the head housekeeper. She was a severe woman in her 60s, with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She looked at Cassidy with thinly veiled disdain. "It's Miss Sullivan," Cassidy corrected, standing up. "Mr. Valenti requests your presence in the dining room. Dinner is served," Greta said stiffly. "Leo will eat in his room as usual." "No," Cassidy said. Greta blinked. "Excuse me." "Leo eats with his father," Cassidy said, surprising herself with her own boldness. "He's terrified, Greta. Isolating him isn't helping. He needs to know he's safe." "Mr. Valenti prefers—" "I don't care what he prefers. I'm the caretaker." Cassidy walked over to Leo and held out her hand. "Leo? Hungry?" The boy looked at her hand, then at the door. Then slowly he stood up and gripped her pinky finger. Greta's mouth formed a thin line, but she stepped aside. The dining room was a cavernous hall with a table long enough to seat 20. Dante sat at the head, a glass of red wine in front of him, reading a dossier. He looked up when they entered, his grey eyes widening slightly when he saw his son. "He's eating with us," Cassidy announced, pulling out a heavy oak chair for Leo right next to Dante, not at the far end. Dante looked at Cassidy, then at the terrified boy. He slowly closed the dossier. "Very well." The meal was excruciating. Servants placed plates of roast duck and truffle risotto in front of them. The silence was suffocating. Dante ate with mechanical precision. Leo picked at his food, his eyes darting around the room. "So," Cassidy said, her voice echoing too loudly, "does anyone want to talk about how the Bears are playing?" Dante stopped chewing. He looked at her as if she had just spoken alien. "I do not follow football." "Right, of course. Too busy ruling the underworld," she muttered under her breath, taking a sip of water. "I heard that," Dante said, though a hint of amusement tugged at the corner of his mouth. Suddenly a loud clatter echoed through the room. Leo had dropped his fork. He froze, his eyes going wide. He looked at Dante, terrified, expecting punishment. Dante sighed, a heavy, tired sound. "It is just a fork, Leo." "Pick it up." But Leo didn't move. He started to hyperventilate. The memories of the water, the violence, were triggered by the sudden noise. Cassidy was out of her chair in a second. She knelt beside him. "Leo, look at me. Look at Cass. You're safe. You're in the kitchen. No water. Just air." Leo grabbed her shoulders, burying his face in her neck. And then he spoke. "Cold," he whispered. His voice was raspy, broken. "Daddy. Cold." Dante froze. His wine glass hovered halfway to his mouth. He stared at his son, who was clinging to the hired help. "He spoke," Dante whispered. Cassidy rubbed Leo's back. "Yeah, he did." She looked up at Dante, her blue eyes fierce and protective. "He's not broken, Dante. He's just freezing. And this house, it's the coldest place on earth." Dante set his glass down. The force of it nearly cracked the stem. He looked at the woman kneeling on his floor, holding his legacy in her arms, challenging him in his own home. "Then warm it up, Cassidy," he said, his voice low and intense. "That is why you are here." 2 weeks passed. The thaw, as Cassidy called it, was slow. Leo was sleeping better, mostly because Cassidy had started reading to him at night, cheap comic books she ordered online, doing different voices for the heroes and villains. But while Leo was improving, the atmosphere in the house was deteriorating. Cassidy felt eyes on her constantly. Not Dante's eyes. His were intense, calculating, but not malicious. These were different. It was the security team. Specifically, Rocco, the head of security. Rocco was a bulldog of a man who treated Cassidy like a security risk. He checked her bags when she came in from the garden. He monitored her phone calls to her mum. One rainy Tuesday, Cassidy was cleaning up the nursery. Leo was in therapy with a child psychologist Dante had flown in from Zurich. Cassidy was picking up the Lego blocks when she noticed something odd about Leo's favorite teddy bear. It was a vintage bear, worn at the seams, but there was a new stitching line on the back, hidden under the vest. She frowned. She picked it up and squeezed it. There was something hard inside, not stuffing. She found a pair of nail scissors and carefully snipped the thread. She dug her fingers into the plush and pulled out a small black disc. A bug. A listening device. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew enough from movies and from the vibe of this house to know this wasn't a baby monitor. She didn't run to Rocco. If a bug was in the nursery, security had either failed or they were involved. She marched straight to Dante's office. The guards at the door tried to stop her. "Miss Sullivan, Mr. Valenti is in a meeting." "I don't care." Cassidy shoved past them and threw the double doors open. Dante was standing behind his desk, flanked by 2 lieutenants. He looked up, fury flashing in his eyes at the interruption. "Cassidy, this better be life or death." "It might be," she said. She walked up to his desk and slammed the black disc down on the mahogany. "I found this in Leo's bear." The room went deathly silent. Dante looked at the device. His face didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at his lieutenants. "Leave us." "Boss!" one started. "Out!" Dante roared. The men scrambled out. Dante picked up the device. He examined it with a terrifying familiarity. "It's a long-range transmitter," he said quietly. "Sophisticated. Not police. This is cartel tech." He looked up at her. "Who has been in the nursery?" "Me, the cleaning crew. And your security team," Cassidy said, crossing her arms. "Rocco checks that room every morning." Dante's jaw tightened. "Rocco has been with me for 10 years. "And Judas was with Jesus for 3, Cassidy shot back. "Someone put that there, Dante. Someone who knows Leo sleeps with that bear. Someone who wants to know where you are keeping him." Dante stood up and walked around the desk. He stopped inches from her. The height difference was intimidating. He towered over her, but Cassidy refused to back down. "You are accusing my head of security of treason," Dante said softly. "I'm accusing someone of targeting a 6-year-old boy," Cassidy hissed. "And I don't care about your loyalty codes or your omerta. I care that Leo is safe, and right now, he's sleeping with a target on his back." Dante stared at her. For a moment, she thought he might strike her or fire her. Instead, he reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, warm, and the touch sent a shockwave of electricity through her body that had nothing to do with fear. "You have good instincts, Cassidy," he murmured. His thumb grazed her cheekbone. "Better than my men." "I'm just observant," she stammered, her breath hitching. "You're dangerous," he corrected, "because you make me trust you, and I don't trust anyone." The moment hung there, thick with unspoken tension. The air crackled with a magnetic pull. Cassidy found herself leaning in, just a fraction. Dante's gaze dropped to her lips. Then the door burst open. It was Rocco. "Boss, we have a problem at the docks," Rocco barked, not noticing the intimacy of the moment, or choosing to ignore it. Dante stepped back instantly, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. He swiped the bug off the desk and into his pocket in one fluid motion. "Handle it, Rocco," Dante said, his voice ice cold. "And then come see me. We need to discuss new security protocols for the nursery." Rocco nodded, but his eyes lingered on Cassidy. There was no warmth there, only calculation. As Rocco left, Dante turned back to Cassidy. "Go back to Leo. Do not leave his side. Do not eat anything that isn't prepared by Greta personally. Do you understand?" "Dante," Cassidy asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What are you going to do?" Dante turned to the window, looking out at the grey Chicago skyline. "I am going to find the rat," he said, "and I am going to exterminate it." The tension in the house broke 3 days later, but not in the way Cassidy hoped. "I have to go where?" Cassidy asked, staring at the dress hanging on her wardrobe door. It was a gown of midnight blue silk, sleek and backless, with a slit that went up to her thigh. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It was also terrified her. "The Valenti Foundation Charity Gala," Dante said. He was leaning against her doorframe, adjusting his cufflinks. He wore a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He looked like James Bond, if James Bond was a ruthless criminal overlord. "I can't go to a gala, Dante. I don't know which fork to use. I'm a waitress from the South Side." "You are Leo's guardian," Dante said, "and Leo must make an appearance. Rumors are circulating that he is brain dead or crippled. Our enemies smell blood in the water. We need to show them he is strong. That we are strong." "So I'm a prop?" Cassidy asked, feeling a sting of hurt. "No," Dante walked over to her. He took the hanger from her hand. "You are his shield. He will not walk into that room without you." He made that very clear. Cassidy sighed. She looked at the dress. "Do I have to wear heels?" "Ideally." The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. It was a sea of diamonds, tuxedos, and fake smiles. Cassidy felt like an imposter. The dress fit perfectly. Dante had guessed her size with unnerving accuracy, but she felt exposed. She held Leo's hand tightly. The boy was wearing a miniature tuxedo, looking adorable but pale. "Head up," Dante whispered in her ear as they entered the ballroom. His hand rested on the small of her back, a burning brand of possession. "If you look frightened, they will eat you alive." "Who are they?" Cassidy whispered back through a smile. "Everyone," Dante replied. The night was a blur of flashes and handshakes. Dante introduced her simply as Cassidy, Leo's governess. She saw the looks the society wives gave her. Judgmental, curious, jealous. She saw the looks the men gave her. Hungry. Dante stayed close, his presence a dark barrier between her and the world. Around 10 p.m., the crowd parted. A man approached. He was older than Dante, with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. "Dante," the man said, spreading his arms. "So good to see the boy is functional." "Salvatore." Dante nodded, his body tensing. "He is better than functional. He is thriving." This was Salvatore Moretti, the rival boss, the man Dante suspected of ordering the hit. Salvatore looked down at Leo. "Hello, little one. You remember Uncle Sal?" Leo shrank back behind Cassidy's legs. Cassidy stepped forward, placing herself physically between the old man and the boy. "He's tired, sir. Back off." The room went silent. "You did not tell Salvatore Moretti to back off." Salvatore's eyes snapped to Cassidy. He smiled, showing expensive veneers. "And who is this spirited creature?" "She is with me," Dante said. His voice was low, but it carried across the room like a gunshot. "Touch her, Sal, and we will have a war right here on the dance floor." Salvatore laughed, holding up his hands. "Easy, Dante." Just admiring the help. He leaned in close to Cassidy, his cologne overpowering. "Be careful, sweetheart. The Valentis have a history of getting their women killed." He walked away, his entourage trailing him. Cassidy was shaking. Dante turned to her, his eyes blazing. "Take Leo to the car, now! Rocco is waiting at the back exit." "What? Why?" "Because Sal just gave the signal," Dante said, scanning the room. "We are leaving." Cassidy grabbed Leo's hand and moved towards the kitchen exit. She moved through the crowd, heart pounding. She pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen. It was empty. Too empty. "Rocco!" she called out. The back door opened. But it wasn't Rocco. It was two men in catering uniforms, wearing ski masks. They held silenced pistols. "Hand over the kid," one of them said. Cassidy shoved Leo behind a stainless steel prep table. She looked around for a weapon. A knife block. A frying pan. Anything. "I said, give us the kid." The man lunged. Cassidy didn't think. She reacted. She grabbed a pot of boiling stock off the stove and threw it. The man screamed as the scalding liquid hit his face. He fired blindly. Foot! A bullet sparked off the metal table inches from Leo's head. Cassidy grabbed a heavy cast-iron skillet. As the second man aimed, she swung it with all the strength of a woman who had carried heavy trays for 6 years. Crack! She hit his wrist. The gun skittered across the floor. "Run, Leo!" she screamed. But the first man, face red and blistering, was getting up. He raised his gun at Cassidy. "Bitch!" he snarled. Cassidy closed her eyes, waiting for the burn. Bang! The shot was loud, unsilenced. Cassidy opened her eyes. The man dropped, a hole in the center of his forehead. Standing in the doorway, smoking gun in hand, was Dante. Behind him, Rocco lay on the floor, bleeding from a knife wound to the gut. Dante walked over to the dead man and kicked the gun away. He looked at Cassidy. She was covered in stock, holding a frying pan, standing over a traumatized boy. "You," Dante said, breathing hard, "are the most incredible woman I have ever met." "Rocco?" Cassidy pointed to the door. "Rocco took a knife for me," Dante said grimly. "He wasn't the rat." Dante looked at the kitchen staff entrance. The rat is still here, and he just tried to finish the job. Dante grabbed Cassidy's arm, pulling her and Leo close. "The war has started," he whispered into her hair, "and there is nowhere left to hide." The drive back to the estate was a blur of speed and silence. Dante drove the bulletproof SUV himself, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Cassidy sat in the back, Leo asleep with his head on her lap. She stroked his hair, her hand trembling. The adrenaline from the kitchen was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. When they arrived, the estate was already in lockdown. Floodlights swept the grounds. Men with assault rifles patrolled the perimeter. It looked less like a home and more like a besieged fortress. "Take Leo upstairs," Dante commanded as soon as they entered the foyer. "Lock the door. Open it for no one but me." "Dante, your hand," Cassidy said, noticing blood dripping from his sleeve. "It's a graze. Go." She didn't argue. She carried the sleeping boy up the grand staircase, her heart echoing the heavy thud of her boots on the marble. Inside the suite, she engaged the deadbolts. She laid Leo on the bed and paced the room. The house felt different tonight. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. She needed water. Her throat was parched from the smoke and screaming. The suite had a small kitchenette, but the pitcher was empty. She hesitated at the door. Open it for no one. But the hallway was clear, and the main kitchen was just down the service stairs. She unlocked the door silently. The hallway was dim. She moved towards the service staircase, the one the staff used. As she reached the landing, she heard a voice. It was a whisper, frantic and hushed, coming from the laundry chute alcove. "It's done! Rocco is down. No, Dante is alive. I can't. You promised no one would get hurt." Cassidy froze. She knew that voice. It was Greta. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to hear. "I opened the service gate," Greta hissed. "The code is 7734. Yes, the cameras are looped. Please, just don't hurt my grandson. You said you'd let him go if I planted the bug." Cassidy's hand flew to her mouth. The bug in the bear, the bad feeling she had about the housekeeper. It wasn't just dislike. It was intuition. Greta wasn't a mastermind. She was a grandmother being blackmailed. But her desperation had just opened the front door to hell. "They're coming now?" Okay. A click. The call ended. Cassidy didn't retreat to the room. There wasn't time. If the service gate was open, Salvatore's men were already on the grounds. The guards at the front gate were looking the wrong way. She turned and ran, not to Leo, but to Dante. She burst into his study. He was stitching his own arm, a bottle of whiskey open on the desk. He looked up, eyes narrowing dangerously. "I told you to stay." "Greta," Cassidy gasped out. "It's Greta." She opened the service gate. "They're here." Dante didn't ask, "Are you sure?" He didn't waste a second. He grabbed a heavy handgun from his desk and hit a red button on the wall. A siren began to wail throughout the house, a low, mournful sound. "Get Leo," he said, his voice calm, terrifyingly steady. "Go to the panic room in the cellar. Do not stop." Crash. The sound came from downstairs, glass-breaking gunfire. "Too late," Dante growled. He racked the slide of his gun. "They're inside." He looked at Cassidy. For the first time, she saw fear in the eyes of the devil of Chicago. Not for himself, but for her. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "If I fall, you pick up the gun, and you shoot anything that isn't me or Leo. Can you do that?" Cassidy thought of the boy upstairs. She thought of the man standing in front of her, bleeding for his family. "Yes," she said. They moved into the hallway. It was chaos. The lights had been cut, the corridor lit only by the muzzle flashes of gunfire erupting from the foyer below. "Leo!" Cassidy screamed, sprinting toward the bedroom. She reached the door. It was ajar. Her blood turned to ice. She had locked it. "Leo!" She burst into the room. The bed was empty. The window was open, the cold November wind billowing the curtains. She ran to the window. A ladder was propped against the sill. Below, on the lawn, she saw two dark shapes dragging a small, struggling figure towards the tree line. "Dante!" she screamed, her voice tearing with raw panic. "They have him! They're taking him to the river!" Dante appeared beside her. He looked out the window, saw the figures, and his face went blank. It was a look of pure, unadulterated death. "Stay here," he said. "No," Cassidy grabbed his arm. "I can swim. You can't catch them in the water." Dante looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. The waitress was gone. The survivor remained. "Move," he said. They didn't take the stairs. They went out the window, sliding down the ladder the kidnappers had used. They hit the grass, running. Gunfire erupted around them. Dante returned fire, dropping a man who stepped out from the shadows. Cassidy didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the small beige coat disappearing into the dark woods near the riverbank. They were heading for the boathouse. Salvatore wasn't just kidnapping Leo. He was going to finish what he started. He was going to drown the air where the river had failed the first time. "Cover me!" Dante yelled. He broke cover, drawing the fire of 3 men guarding the path. Cassidy used the distraction. She ducked under the low branches of the weeping willows, sprinting towards the water. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she didn't slow down. She reached the boathouse just as the engine of a speedboat roared to life. The speedboat was untied, drifting away from the dock. In the stern, a massive man held Leo by the scruff of his neck. At the wheel was Salvatore Moretti himself, laughing into the wind. "Too slow, sweetheart," Salvatore yelled over the engine's roar. Cassidy stood on the edge of the dock. The boat was 10 feet away, 15. She didn't think about the cold. She didn't think about the bullets. She ran. She hit the end of the wooden dock and launched herself into the air. It was a desperate, impossible leap. Her fingers scrabbled against the slick fiberglass hull of the boat. She slammed into the side, her ribs cracking against the railing. But she held on. She dragged herself over the gunwale, gasping. "What the—" The guard holding Leo turned. Cassidy didn't have a weapon. She had rage. She kicked the guard squarely in the knee. The joint snapped with a sickening pop. The man howled and dropped Leo. "Get down, Leo!" Cassidy screamed. The boy scrambled under the dashboard. Salvatore abandoned the wheel, pulling a gold-plated revolver from his jacket. "You persistent little rat!" The boat swerved wildly, throwing Cassidy off balance. She slid across the wet deck. Salvatore aimed the gun at her chest. Click! Misfire! Cassidy scrambled for a flare gun mounted on the wall of the boat. She ripped it free. Salvatore fixed the jam and raised the gun again. "Goodbye, waitress!" Cassidy didn't aim for him. She aimed for the pile of spare fuel canisters stacked in the corner behind him. She pulled the trigger. The flare hissed through the air, a streak of red phosphorus. It hit the canister. Boom! The explosion rocked the boat. A wall of fire erupted between Cassidy and Salvatore. The old Don screamed as the heat engulfed the rear of the vessel. "Jump, Leo!" Cassidy grabbed the boy. "I can't swim!" Leo shrieked, paralyzed by the black water. "I can!" Cassidy yelled. "Trust me!" She wrapped her arms around him, shielding his head, and threw them both over the side. They hit the freezing water. The shock was just as bad as the first time. But this time, Cassidy had a mission. She kicked hard, surfacing away from the burning wreck of the boat. Debris rained down around them. The boat was a floating inferno, drifting downstream. "Hold on to me," Cassidy gasped, treading water. "I got you." From the shore, a spotlight hit them. Cassidy squinted against the glare. Was it Moretti's men? Was this the end? "Cassidy!" The voice was rough, broken. Dante. He was wading into the river, his expensive suit ruined, the water up to his chest. He reached out his hand. Cassidy kicked toward him. Her strength was failing. The cold was seeping into her bones, shutting her down. Dante grabbed her arm. He pulled them both toward him, crushing them against his chest. He was shaking. The invincible Mafia boss was shaking. He carried them both to the bank. He collapsed on the grass, Leo sandwiched between them. "Is he dead?" Dante asked, looking at the burning boat. "He's gone," Cassidy whispered, her teeth chattering. "It's over." Dante looked down at her. Her hair was matted with river water, her dress torn, her face bruised. "You saved him," Dante said, his voice thick with emotion. "Again." "That's my job," Cassidy managed a weak smile. "It's in the contract." Dante laughed. It was a dry, rusty sound, but it was real. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. "Contract is void," he whispered. "Does that mean I'm fired?" "No," Dante said. He brushed a wet strand of hair from her face. "It means you're promoted. Permanent position." He kissed her. It was cold and wet, and tasted of river water and smoke. But it was the warmest thing Cassidy had ever felt. "Daddy?" They broke apart. Leo was sitting up, wrapped in Dante's jacket. He looked at the burning boat, then at Cassidy. "Did you explode the bad man?" Leo asked. Cassidy hesitated. Yeah," Leo nodded solemnly. "Cool." Dante threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure relief echoing into the Chicago night. 6 months later. The spring sun was warm on the terrace. Cassidy sat with a book, watching Leo chase a new puppy, a golden retriever named Spark, across the lawn. The security was still there, but it was discreet now, the fear was gone. The glass door opened. Dante walked out. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt. He looked 10 years younger. He placed a cup of coffee on the table and sat on the arm of her chair. "Greta's trial starts today," he said quietly. "Did she take the plea deal?" Cassidy asked. "She did. She gave up everyone in Salvatore's organization who survived the purge. She'll do 5 years in minimum security. Her grandson is safe." Cassidy nodded. "Good." Dante took her hand. On her finger was a ring, not a diamond, too cliché. It was a sapphire, deep and blue, the color of the river at night. "You know," Dante mused, looking at his son laughing in the grass, "I spent my whole life building an empire to leave to him. Money, power, soldiers. I thought that was what kept you safe." He looked at Cassidy, his grey eyes soft. "I was wrong. It's not the soldiers. It's the person who is willing to jump in the water when everyone else runs away." Cassidy squeezed his hand. "Well, don't get used to it. The water was freezing." I know, Dante smiled, leaning down to kiss her. I'll keep you warm. Leo ran over, the puppy barking at his heels. Cass, Dad, Spark dug a hole. They looked at each other and smiled. It wasn't a perfect life. It was still a dangerous world. But as Cassidy looked at the two Valenti men, she knew one thing for sure. They would never drown again. And that is the story of the drowning debt. What did you think? Did Cassidy make the right choice staying with Dante? Or should she have taken the money and run? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this twisty mafia romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post new dramas every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.